Hey there, welcome to the Lore to Death podcast. My name's Brett, and today I want to take a little trip down memory lane to a series that will forever hold my heart, and that is Metroid. While it's one of my favorite series, and I will die on the hill that Super Metroid and Metroid Prime are near perfect games, what brought me to writing about it in particular is that I've been playing through Metroid Prime Remaster for the Switch. It's also convenient that I wrote this episode ages ago, and then so at the time of recording, I've started playing through a game called Blasphemous. And if you've never heard of Blasphemous, it is basically a perfect Metroidvania game. And I don't say that lightly. I haven't quite finished it yet, but I feel like I'm pretty far into it. And out of all of the Metroidvania games that I've played, aside from the original, Metroid and Castlevania, everything from the movement to the weird cryptic story is absolutely perfect, and I kind of want to try to do an episode on the lore on that because it is extremely confusing. But as I was running through the world of Talos 4, exterminating all of the local wildlife, I realized that I don't really know a whole lot about our protagonist, Samus Aran. All I really knew is that she was a bounty hunter, a former Federation police member, and had a penchant for hunting down space pirates. I wondered if there was anything more to that story, and to my surprise, it turns out that there is actually plenty. Not as much as I think that Samus deserves, but there's a good amount of supplemental content to the games, such as a manga that I had no idea about. So after reading through that, I think I have a pretty decent grasp on who our silent hero is. So instead of giving my usual preamble to the episode, let's just get into it, shall we? I think it's worth noting that there are several different accepted pronunciations of Samus Aran, specifically her last name, and there's actually only one correct answer. In English, pronunciations vary from Aran to Aran, but in Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, we got the correct pronunciation from one of the voice actors, which is Aran. You could say that none of this matters, and you would be absolutely correct. But I spent most of my childhood debating things like this, and I feel like getting a voiced pronunciation is the greatest form of retribution. It's like when they said Hermione's name on screen for the first time in Harry Potter, and all of the Hermione people got a swift slap in the face. I'm just really petty about weird things, okay? Anyways, Samus Aran, as we know her in the games, is a bounty hunter. But everything that I talk about here before the events of the first Metroid is from the manga series. Characterized by her imposing stature and power suit, which has a cannon on her right arm instead of a hand, Samus actually grew up on a mining colony called K2L. K2L was a settlement placed by the Galactic Federation to mine a rare mineral called alfluorolite, which was used to fuel and power all spacefaring vessels from Federation to Pirate. She was born and raised there for the first 3 to 6 years of her life, where her father, Rodney Aran, was in charge of the mining operation with his wife, Virginia Aran. I said the first 3 to 6, and I know that seems like a very wide spread, but I'll get back to that later. I promise it'll make a little bit of sense. So during the time where she was anywhere between 3 and 6 years old, the colony was visited by a bird-like race called the Chozo, who were on K2L looking to purchase some alfluorolite. Rodney Aran, in charge of the operation, was confused as to why the Chozo would come directly to the mining operation to get the mineral and refused to give them any, stating that he doesn't understand why they need it so badly, and he must know why they need it before he gives it to them. The Chozo that he was dealing with was named Grey Voice, and he understood the hesitation and did not press the matter further. Instead, the Chozo decided to leave the colony in peace. Meanwhile, Samus was making friends with one of the Chozo named Old Bird, who was teaching her that befriending and understanding others can be used to solve problems. He demonstrated his philosophy by showing a young Samus how to make friends with a rabbit squirrel-like creature, which she called Pionchi, and kept with her for several years. But without the minerals in hand, the Chozo left K2L empty-handed. Unfortunately for the colony, there was a space pirate flagship following the Chozo, led by none other than Samus's future rival, Ridley. The pirates were likely following the Chozo in hopes of finding the source of alfluorolite, making it either dumb luck or great strategy that led them to the K2L mining operation. The space pirates landed on the colony and began a raid, killing the colonists and stealing whatever resources they could get. It was here that Samus met Ridley for the first time. But despite being horrified by his massive dragon-like appearance, she remembered what Old Bird had just taught her. She did her best to push her fear aside and attempted to befriend Ridley. In response to a child's friendliness, and in true Ridley fashion, he attempted to kill her instead. Fortunately, he was unsuccessful, but unfortunately for Samus, it was her mother that jumped in front of the killing blow, saving Samus's life. At the same time that was happening, Rodney Aran was devising a way to stop the pirates from getting away with any of the alfluorotite. He realized that the only way to do this was to board the vessel where they were taking the mineral and ignited the stash with a welding laser. The minerals went up in flames as it killed not only the pirates, but Rodney as well. Ridley was wounded as a result, and this gave Samus time to escape, making her the lone survivor of the colony. With basically all of the pirates dead and their flagship destroyed, the Chozo received a distress beacon from K2L. Grey Voice saw that the distress call was meant for the Federation police, and deduced that the space pirates must have raided K2L. Old Bird feared that his little friend was in danger, and so he ordered the ship to be turned around at once and headed back for K2L. It was there that they discovered a lone Samus and reasoned that the only course of action was to take her in as their adopted kin, and took her back to their home planet, Zebes. It was there that Mother Brain, a sentient supercomputer that was the brains of the Chozo civilization and was the reason that they were so much more advanced than any other race, deduced that since Samus was not from Zebes, she would not be able to withstand the harsh environment. The only solution that they could come up with, if they wanted to raise her, was to integrate her human DNA with Chozo DNA. This not only allowed her to survive on Zebes, but made her naturally adaptable to other planets with hostile environments as well. And also gave her some greater than human abilities like being able to run faster, jump higher, and survive falls that would normally kill a human. From this point on, being anywhere from 3 to 6 years old, Old Bird and Grey Voice trained her until she was about 14 to 17. During this time, they trained her in the ways of the infamous power suit. Samus's training was rigorous, and her abilities were held to the highest standard. The Chozo saw themselves as the protectors of the galaxy, seeing as their technology was leagues ahead of other races. Because of this, Grey Voice was insistent that second or third place was unacceptable, and that if she were going to continue her training, her aim would have to be the best of the best. She was also trained, much like Old Bird taught her briefly on K2L, that she was only ever to use her powers for the good of others and never to exploit or harm others. That doesn't mean that she couldn't kill anyone, but if she did kill anyone, there had to be a very good reason for it. One day, after a particularly difficult training session, Samus needed to be alone to calm down. She went to go watch the Ionospharia, a butterfly-like species, as they absorbed moisture from the air and ionized it to fly. Samus sat there, fed the Ionospharia, and picked some flowers. When Grey Voice came to check on her, she showed him the flowers that she had picked, and he immediately noticed that they were an extremely poisonous flower called the badger clover, which were brought from another planet by the Ionospharia. After consulting with Mother Brain, Grey Voice decided that to protect the ecosystem, they needed to burn both the flowers and the Ionospharia. Samus objected, insisting that Grey Voice's measures were conceited, and that there had to be another way to deal with the situation. And at the same time, upon being provoked, the Ionospharia began to use weapons left behind by a prior space pirate raid in the area to defend themselves when Samus jumped in. Aiming only to disarm and disable the weapons, Samus was able to get the Ionospharia to stand down, and Mother Brain was able to begin damage control, getting rid of the flowers and saving their lives. Overwhelmed with emotion, Samus went on another meltdown and went to another room to cool off. Old Bird came to her this time and explained that she was ready to leave Zebes and go off on her own. He explained to her that the Chozo were a declining species relying too much on the word of Mother Brain, and that Samus would be better off exploring on her own instead of being hindered by their ways. This caught Samus off guard, and she was surprised, and insisted that she wasn't ready as her training had barely just begun. But Old Bird was insistent that the only thing left for her was to master the power that they gave to her by training her heart, which she would have to walk new paths to find the correct one. So Samus left Zebes to find her own way and live up to the Chozo's legacy as protectors of the galaxy. There's an indefinite amount of time between when she left and the next event, but we can assume it was pretty close together given her age. Samus joined up with the Federation police, where she was assigned several recon missions, mostly to keep tabs on space pirate activities in the area. Samus was somewhere between 14 and 17 when she joined the Federation police. And I know that 14 to 17 is a pretty big age gap, but it's the same reason that I said she was 3 to 6 when the K2L raid happened. This is because there was a little bit of contention surrounding when these events happened. An older source said that she was 3 years old on K2L and 14 when she joined the Federation, while the Other M concept art, a much newer source, states that she was about 4 to 6 years old on K2L, which would put her at 15 to 17 during the time of the Federation Police. Unfortunately, what you believe really depends on whether or not you take the original source content over the newer revised content as gospel. I'm not really sure that there's one right answer, so I'm just giving the full range and I'm going to accept it for what it is. Although, I would be more content to accept the original source, and that's just because the information from Other M comes from concept art, which is usually just roughed in information that should be taken with a grain of salt. Either way, being between the age of 14 and 17 is extremely young to basically become a police officer, and this was actually acknowledged by Nintendo Comic System in the comic The Coming of a Hero, which refers to Samus as the youngest police officer to ever become a Star Tracker. This comic also has some love interest shenanigans that point to Samus being a young adult by the time of the first Metroid game, which I think would make an amount of sense. Because there's no defined timeline as to how long she was in the Federation Police, I think it would make sense that it was at least 4 or 5 years before the events of the first game so that she had time to get some experience and a foothold on her abilities and establish herself before going off on her own. But that's kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, so let's go back to when she joined the Federation Police. So Samus had just started her work with the Federation Police. During this time, she was assigned to a reconnaissance mission on the planet of Jigrid. As per the usual, the gig was to monitor space pirate activity with her teammates Kreets and Mach. This time, they had reason to believe that the space pirates had left a remnant force on the planet and were forcing the native population to build what Samus described as a gaudy building, with no seeming purpose other than to terrorize the native population. Seeing nothing immediately nefarious other than, mild slave labor, Kreets suggested that they go back to headquarters to report their findings, then come back with a squadron to take the pirates out, as was protocol. And that's when Samus noticed that the pirates were bringing in children to do their bidding. However, it seemed that the children needed to pass through a scanner, that if the sensor was not triggered, the child would be killed. Even for space pirates, killing children for no apparent reason was just cruel and unusual, and so Samus went in for the rescue. Just as the pirate was about to kill a young girl, taunting her about how there wasn't any reason for her execution aside from entertainment value, Samus swooped in and protected the young girl from harm, and attempted to put the pirates under arrest. Being only one against many, the pirate commander ordered the others to fire on Samus. Samus did her best to get the civilians to safety, while she continued fighting. And while they were skeptical of her methods and worried about breaking protocol by not reporting back to headquarters before starting a firefight, Kreets and Mach joined the fight as well. On the cusp of winning the fight, there was one pirate left who was crawling under the scanner that they had the children go through. It seemed that since he was crawling through it, the scanner did not beep, and so Samus, in an act of retribution, was intent on executing the pirate in the same way that he had executed the other children, as he was begging for mercy. But after some internal debate with PTSD from her childhood, she decided to let the pirate live, and put him under arrest instead, showing that she was capable of mercy and that she was better than the pirates who murdered her family and the children here. The 3 Federation members made sure that the civilians were safe and headed back to headquarters, where their less than happy Chief Hardy reprimanded them for disobeying orders and protocol. And he wasn't the only one who was unhappy with her, as her commanding officer, Adam Malkovich, referred to her as extra baggage that they had to deal with now that the space pirates were dealt with. There's literally no more information as to why he would refer to Samus as extra baggage, but I'm assuming it's because Samus is kind of insolent and insubordinate, acting on her own impulses rather than following protocol. I think that in his shoes, he would rather have someone in the Federation Police who blindly followed his orders, rather than making up their own mind as to what they think the right decisions were. Meanwhile, the Federation Police gets to profit off of Samus's gains and declare that these space pirates were nothing to be afraid of, and that they were nothing like the monsters of bedtime stories that people saw them as. So Samus clearly made the right move in fighting these pirates, but she was still being berated for it. But I guess that's just kind of, hierarchical structures. After interrogating the space pirates that they had in captivity, they found out that the pirate raid on Jigrad was nothing more than a decoy to distract from a much larger raid. The raid in question was on Zebes, and the Federation army was going to be deployed there to essentially torch the planet and get rid of the space pirate base that had been established there. Upon learning that the space pirates were attacking Zebes, Samus immediately abandoned her post and headed out to save her adopted homeworld. She has a run-in with Adam Malkovich while running to her ship, where he mocks her for abandoning everything to follow her emotions. Yet still, he lets her know that she has 48 hours before the army arrives and refused to elaborate more. So it seems like he was helping her or encouraging her a little bit, but he certainly didn't stop her. I think that Malkovich understood that Samus was a force to be reckoned with, and that if there's any hope of saving what might be left of Zebes, Samus was going to be the one to do it. So Samus headed off to Zebes with Kreets and Mach in tow. Upon entering the planet's atmosphere, they saw that the planet had been ravaged. Pillars of smoke rose from the fires of ruined buildings, and not a Chozo was to be seen. The three were quickly attacked by space pirate forces when Samus saw her old friend in the distance, Pianchi, who was hopping towards a cave. They decided to follow along to escape from the space pirates and hopefully find what was left of the Chozo. What they found was a communications facility where there was a holo projection of Old Bird, her former mentor. In this pre-recorded message, they found out that the Chozo were struck when they were most vulnerable, leaving them no choice but to surrender Zebes to the space pirates. They found out about the Metroid, which in the Chozo language meant Ultimate Warrior, which was a project by the Chozo to create a genetically modified life form to fight off against what they called the X-Parasite. Turns out this is what the space pirates were after. At the end of the message, Old Bird pleads that the one who finds this message somehow finds Samus Aran, for she is the only one who can inherit the Chozo's will and save the galaxy from both the X-Parasite, Metroid, and, well, also the space pirates. They also learned that there would likely be prisoners, and that some of the Chozo might actually be alive, but were urged to get away from Zebes. Kreets suggests that they have a new mission directive, rescue the prisoners before they get off the planet. Samus agrees that she will try to find Mother Brain, the planet's supercomputer, and get it done while Kreets and Mach stay behind with Pianchi. Since Samus is the one who's familiar with the planet, and her friends, while they might be useful, would likely just be dead weight. And so with that, she set off on her own personal mission. However, she was too late. The building was already lazy with space pirates, and just as she was preparing to dispatch them, a familiar voice rang in the room. Grey Voice, who was urging Samus to lower her weapon and look to be working with the space pirates. Samus started having a bit of a meltdown, understandably, not understanding why Grey Voice and Mother Brain were working with the pirates. Grey Voice ordered them to leave the room to have some time alone with Samus, and much to her surprise, the pirates actually left the room as per his command. She learned that Grey Voice and Mother Brain were taking advantage of the space pirates' primal need to follow a queen, much like a worker bee. They were acting as their masters as a means to an end to keep the Chozo legacy alive, explaining that while the Chozo were a great and prosperous race, their numbers had been on a notable decline for quite some time. They had a plan to unite the galaxy into one society led by Mother Brain, who was an amalgamation of the Chozo's histories and successes. But Mother Brain was essentially trying to force out the Elder Chozo, for she fulfilled their purpose and more, having all of the knowledge of their race, making the Elder Chozo basically null and void. And Mother Brain was working with the space pirates in an attempt to unify the galaxy, seemingly by culling those who didn't agree with the Brain's idea of unity. And that Samus was nothing more than a bioweapon to make that happen. After all, she was the perfect soldier and inheritor of the Chozo legacy. It was here that Samus had her first encounter since her childhood with the one who was responsible for the death of her family, Ridley, who was working directly under Mother Brain. As you might imagine, this was a very traumatic experience for Samus. She almost immediately started having a panic attack, and Mother Brain deduced that she was exhibiting symptoms of PTSD upon seeing Ridley. And surprisingly, Ridley recognized Samus despite not having seen her in almost 2 decades, and blamed her for destroying his warship and troops on K2L when, really, it was her father and not her. But what does Ridley know? He's just a giant stupid space pterodactyl. Ridley asked Grey Voice to execute Samus as an act of good faith to the space pirates, but he refused, citing that it was not the Chozo way to bring harm upon someone who couldn't fight back. So instead, he gave Ridley permission to start killing the other Chozo elders, seeing as Mother Brain made them redundant. Unbeknownst to Samus, her friends had decided that her orders to stay put weren't in their best interest, so they decided to skulk around in the ventilation system to see if there was some way they could follow and help her. Witnessing Ridley kill the unarmed Chozo while a panicked Samus laid on the ground, Mach decided to even the odds by remotely disabling their ship's standby mode, ordering it to start the engine and ready the ion cannons to cause a distraction. And distract Ridley by causing distant explosions it did. Ridley and the other space pirates left to go investigate, and so at this point, Kreitz and Mach made their way down to start helping the hostages and Samus. Samus, however, had seemingly lost her mind, screaming that they should kill her before Ridley comes back to hack them to pieces and eat their corpses. With the help of Grey Voice, they were able to ease her suffering and anxiety, and she eventually came back to her usual self. Grey Voice revealed that from the start, the Elders had decided that in order to save the Chozo, they needed to destroy Mother Brain. And that's why they surrendered Zebes to the space pirates, because they needed to buy enough time to be able to find a way to do so. With the Federation army closing in and the space pirate mothership retreating, the trio knew that they needed to quickly get their way off planet as well. Grey Voice donned his own power suit and set off to attack Mother Brain to put things right. But the party was eventually crashed by Ridley, who began to fight against Grey Voice. Unfortunately, Grey Voice made the necessary sacrifice in order to hold up Ridley for long enough that Samus and the crew could get away before the Federation army swooped in. They escaped the planet, and Grey Voice died. After this point, there's a few years gap, and during this period, we know that Samus left the Federation police and went off on her own as a bounty hunter. But we don't know much more past that. We can infer from the following events where she intercepts a space pirate assassination attempt that she has spent this time hunting down the pirates. But that's just speculation. There's a big time jump and there's literally no information. But also during this period, the Metroid were able to run free and start causing havoc, creating a bit of a panic amongst the higher-ups in the Federation. We also learned that Mother Brain was, in fact, still alive and well on Zebes, being protected by the harsh environment where no one could get to, and created a small fortress around herself so that she could not be harmed. Malkovich contacted Samus as the Federation knew that she was the only one who could go to stop Mother Brain, and in turn, stop the Metroid and the space pirates. The manga actually goes on past this point, but I'm pretty sure this is where the events of the first game take place, as well as Zero Mission, as it's the first time that Samus returned to Zebes with the aim of killing Mother Brain. So I think there's a little bit of overlap in those, and so here's where we're going to start talking about the games. Now, I wonder if she ran into Ridley again before this point, because when she next encountered him on Zebes, she had no trace of the PTSD that she experienced on Zebes before, but was instead rather aggressive towards Ridley. This was also the start of when Samus starts losing her suit upgrades in every single game. Every game has a different reason, and it's mostly for the sake of being able to get upgrades so you can backtrack through prior areas in the typical Metroidvania style. But I always found it hilarious that she's this renowned bounty hunter who is basically invincible, and yet she's always losing her power suit upgrades and constantly scrambling to get them back. But without that little factor, we wouldn't have the Metroidvania genre. And speaking of the power suit, I think this is a good time to talk about it, speaking of the upgrades. I always thought when I was a kid playing Super Metroid that it was too convenient that Metroid has this specific armor and that these seemingly random planets just happen to have compatible upgrades. And yes, these are the things that I thought about as a kid. I was always a bit too overly critical about logic in games, and that's something that I really had to let go of to be able to enjoy some titles. But let's take this example from the first Metroid. Samus was given her power suit by the Chozo, which was largely created by the Chozo Drin. It came with a standard power beam, which she wields on her right arm, and an oxygen supply so that she can survive almost indefinitely in areas without oxygen, to both help in areas without oxygen, such as in space or underwater, and on planets with hostile atmospheres. The power suit was specifically made to be modular so that Samus could customize her loadout depending on the mission. After all, you don't want to be bringing your entire arsenal on every single mission because that sounds exhausting. The Chozo, having used the power suits in a similar configuration themselves, had various upgrades littered around the planets that they inhabited so that they could change up their gear on the fly. And this is what Samus is able to use to upgrade her suits in the games. This includes things like upgrades to ammunition or energy tank upgrades to increase the amount of protection that the suit provides. She can also turn into a morph ball at will, which I've always found fascinating. She basically curls up to a sphere that is 0.8 meters in diameter, and no, I don't understand how that's physically possible, considering she stands above 6 feet tall. 6 feet is almost 2 meters, and I don't know, I guess half that. Who knows? Anyways, she does this so she can fit into small crevices or tracks specifically made for the morph ball. In this form, she can also lay bombs that destroy enemies or environments without hurting her in the process. I think that's pretty nifty. Along with various mechanical elements to the suit, most of the suit's function is actually biological in nature, which I very briefly mentioned before, I think. The suit would respond to Samus's movements and enhance them, making her more agile, strong, and durable than the average bounty hunter. It also bonded to Samus biologically, meaning that it can't be taken off without her permission. On top of that, she's able to summon the suit at will without having to take time to don or doff it. Typically shown in a flash of bright light, the suit can dematerialize at Samus's command, allowing her to switch between her Zero suit and Power suit depending on the situation. This also means that she is literally always prepared for a fight, assuming that the Power suit isn't malfunctioning in any way, since she can summon it at will. Anyways, back to the events of Metroid, she worked her way through the fortress on Zebes that had been erected, which transformed her adopted home planet into something basically unrecognizable. After fighting her way through Zebes and acquiring several upgrades, she fights a version of Ridley who had been augmented with all kinds of mechanical bits and defeats him. She then proceeds to defeat Mother Brain, setting off a self-destruct sequence in her fortress and escapes the planet. And that's where the manga ends, and so at this point it's going to be all game all the time. And I'm going to give a very quick rundown of all the games. I don't want to go into a ton of detail since I don't feel like making a 4-hour-long episode, but if there's enough interest, I would gladly take a couple more episodes dedicated to going over the plot of the various games. But I think this is going to serve as a good enough for most people. After receiving a distress beacon above the planet of Tallon 4, Samus traces it back to a derelict vessel in orbit of the planet in the events of Metroid Prime. This vessel turned out to be a space pirate frigate called Orpheon, where the space pirates were getting jiggy with various experiments on life forms using phazon, an extremely radioactive organic substance that would either cause death or mutation. The space pirates were looking to use phazon to mutate life forms on Tallon 4 to be used as bioweapons. Samus defeated a mutated parasite queen on the frigate and triggered another self-destruct sequence, forcing her to get back to her ship as she encountered Ridley again, who had been reborn again after his prior defeat as Meta Ridley. And Ridley escaped the frigate and fled to the planet below. But never letting an opportunity to mess with her rival pass, Samus followed Ridley to the planet, but not before an explosion caused her to lose all of her suit upgrades once again. As she explores the planet, she finds the Chozo ruins and finds out that the Chozo civilization on Tallon 4 was brought to an end because of a massive phazon meteor impact, which poisoned the waters and wreaked havoc on the ecosystem. Eventually, Samus found herself at the impact site where she found various texts that seemingly prophesized her coming as the Entrusted One. After collecting some Chozo artifacts and getting her upgrades back from the Chozo ruins, she defeated Meta Ridley once again. Inside the crater, she found out that the source of the phazon corruption was Metroid Prime, a phazon-corrupted Metroid that she defeated before heading off the planet. Before Metroid Prime died, it grabbed onto Samus before destabilizing and rose up after her departure as Dark Samus, which was basically the phazon doing its best to copy Samus in her power suit. After the Tallon 4 incident, the Galactic Federation hired Samus to go find a warship of theirs, the GFS Tier. She tracked it to the planet of Ether where her ship was damaged by the magnetic storms, and she was stranded on the surface of Ether while her ship repaired itself. In the meantime, Samus was able to discover that the crew of the Tier had been killed by hordes of creatures called Splinters, and that their bodies had become the hosts for a parasite. She defeated the Alpha Splinter and met Umos, the last Sentinel of Ether and the leader of the Luminoth, who made their home on that planet. Umos pleaded that Samus helped the Luminoths stave off their enemy, the parasite that she encountered before, called the Ing, to save them. During her mission, she encountered Dark Samus multiple times, and engaged in combat with her doppelganger along with several space pirates. Eventually, she made her way to the top of the Sky Temple where she killed the Emperor Ing and saved the planet. After this incident, with their warship and crew found to be lost, the Galactic Federation sent in another ship and crew to help the Luminoth rebuild after it had been savaged by the Ing and the space pirates, bringing us to the end of Metroid Prime 2, Echoes. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption starts 6 months after the events of Metroid Prime 2. Once again hired by the Federation, Samus travels to the Federation flagship where she found out that she's going to work with 3 other hunters, named Rundus, Gore, and Gendrada. The mission was to investigate a phazon outbreak that had spread to several of their supercomputers. The flagship, Olympus, was then raided by space pirates who gave chase to the planet below, Norion, where the hunters followed. The hunters found out that similarly to Tallon 4, there is a phazon-laden meteor that is going to make an impact on Norion, which would be a massive blow to the Federation, seeing as Norion was their most important military planet. So the hunters set off to find a solution, and what they found was that they could basically blow the meteor out of the sky with a massive energy cannon. which they only needed to restore power to. They also learned that the meteors were actually sentient beings called Leviathans. On her mission, Samus is once again accosted by Meta Ridley, who was resurrected by the space pirates. For being pirates, they are either extremely skilled scientists or great necromancers because, by God, they know how to keep this dinosaur alive. And as you might have assumed, Samus was able to defeat Ridley again and restore power to the cannon before being confronted by Dark Samus, who single-handedly knocks all 4 of the hunters unconscious with a phazon blast. However, Samus was able to stay conscious just long enough to activate the cannon and destroy the meteor. After going unconscious, Samus woke up about a month later to be told that the other hunters were already awake and working on producing phazon to both protect themselves from phazon attacks like the one on Norian, and also enhance their own attacks. They were sent out on separate missions to other planets which had similar Leviathan impacts to dispatch any issues, but communication was lost with them shortly after their dispatch, so it was up to Samus to investigate and find the other hunters, for better or for worse. During the mission, Samus discovered that the other hunters had started to show signs of phazon corruption, as they were immediately hostile on contact. She was forced to put them down, unfortunately, and while on the space pirate homeworld, where I guess you can't call them space pirates because this is their homeworld, so I guess they're just pirates here, she found out that the hunters had been completely taken over by the phazon and were under the control of Dark Samus, and they were all put in charge of a force of space pirates to defend the meteor impacts rather than destroy them. So Samus had to finish their mission for them. As she proceeds through her mission, Samus starts losing control over her own body, as it turns out that she had natural phazon in her blood that was slowly being corrupted. While this gave way to some sweet new powers, it was difficult for her to maintain her control while she was using them. But after she was able to complete her mission, a unit announced the discovery of a single planet that was the source of all phazon, aptly called Phase, and that Dark Samus was in control of it using an Aurora unit, a biological supercomputer similar to Mother Brain, which was stolen from the GFS Valhalla. Samus, exploring the derelict ship, found a way to travel to Phase through a wormhole that the Leviathans created, and so she set a course for Phase. On Phase, the phazon had completely corrupted Samus to the point where her ship would no longer recognize her biology. Thus, she had no getaway until she could find a way to get rid of the corruption. Samus was forced to embrace her phazon corruption to survive, which made her basically a ticking time bomb. While in the Phase core, she encounters Dark Samus and they are forced to duke it out once again. Dark Samus, losing the fight, took the drastic measure of merging with the Aurora supercomputer in an attempt to win over Samus, but was ultimately unsuccessful. Samus won and destroyed the corrupted supercomputer, which put the planet into an unstable state, forcing her to make a quick getaway. With Phase destroyed, she was able to get free of the phazon corruption and get back to her ship, which now recognized her, and get off the planet and back into Federation space, hopefully leaving the phazon corruption in her wake for good. After the destruction of Phase, Samus is sent out on a mission, taking place during Metroid 2, Samus's return, to eradicate the entire Metroid population. Since now that phazon was no longer an issue, the Metroid were the biggest threat to the galaxy. She went to the planet of SR-388, fought with the Metroid Queen, won, and destroyed the Metroid population along with her. But it wasn't a complete genocide. One last Metroid hatched from an egg, and instead of killing the infant Metroid, Samus brought it back to the Cirrus space colony so they could perform research on it. Maybe she should have killed it and just been done with it, but as we know, Samus was a very compassionate person, and I don't know if she had it in her. In perfect space pirate fashion, as soon as Samus left the Cirrus space colony, she got a distress signal that it was under attack. She returned to find the scientist dead and the baby Metroid missing, and this is where the events of Super Metroid take place. And of course, it wouldn't be a Samus rescue mission if she didn't encounter Ridley, who was holding the baby Metroid. He was able to flee before the colony station was put into self-destruct mode and she was forced to retreat, and follow these space pirates to a rebuilt Zebes to finish them off and retrieve the baby Metroid. If there's two things you can always count on in a Metroid game, it's that there's probably a self-destruct sequence, and you probably have to fight Ridley. On Zebes once again, Samus learns that she really needs to learn the second rule of Zombieland, the double tap, when she encounters several enemies that she had previously defeated, like Kraid. Proceeding deeper into the facility, she finds a myriad of Metroids along with her precious little baby, which was now far larger than when she left it. It thanks her for its life with a little kiss that drains Samus's power suit energy to 1, nearly killing her. Once she had time to recover from her not-so-happy reunion with the Metroid, Samus made her way to Mother Brain. And I know what you're thinking, because it's probably the same thing I'm thinking. Is Samus capable of killing anything? And I'm not really sure if she is. As badass as Samus is, she doesn't seem to stick around to make sure that her messes are properly cleaned up. So Samus destroyed Mother Brain's containment chamber, and Mother Brain rose up from the platform with a giant mech body. As she is running and gunning, Samus was greeted by the not-so-baby Metroid, who helps Samus by occasionally replenishing her energy tanks. The Metroid attempted to assault Mother Brain directly, but was killed in the process, and it turned out that by being given energy from the Metroid, Samus's weapons overcharged to giving her massive firepower, which she used to, hopefully, finish off Mother Brain. Cue the self-destruct sequence and subsequent escape from the planet, and Zebes exploded entirely, leaving nothing behind. A few months after the Zebes incident, Samus, who was no longer under Federation contract, received a distress signal coming from a station known as the Bottle Ship, which took place during the events of Metroid Other M. Shortly after landing, she came into contact with a Federation platoon led by her former commanding officer, Adam Malkovich. No longer under contract, the Federation platoon largely ignored Samus and didn't play particularly nice with her. However, they realized that they needed her help, and Malkovich agreed to work with her so long as she explicitly followed orders from him. On her journey, she discovered that the Federation had been, against protocol, genetically modifying the life forms aboard the ship to be used as bioweapons. Because why would they be doing anything normal, like studying culinary arts or making arts and crafts? They also dispatched an assassin who would take care of anyone who learned about their activities, and that assassin was in the platoon that was aboard the bottle ship. Much to her surprise, and because the devs just can't give it up, it turns out that Mother Brain's AI was used to create an android that could control Metroids. But what's that, you say? The Metroids were wiped out? Yeah, we thought that too. We also thought that Ridley was dead for sure, but DNA from Samus's power suit was used to clone him, bringing him back to life once again. Samus obviously had to deal with all of these problems herself since the Federation was now secretly involved. Along the way, she found one of the scientists and learned that they accidentally created another Queen Metroid. Now, you can accidentally burn a grilled cheese. You can accidentally stub your toe. But I don't know how you managed to accidentally create a Queen Metroid. That's like saying you accidentally shot a man 37 times in the chest. I'm starting to think it was intentional and you're just lying to cover up your mistakes, Madeline. So Samus defeated the Queen Metroid, shut down the Mother Brain android, and left the bottle ship, which had been marked for destruction by the Federation. But Samus was way ahead of the Federation and triggered a self-destruct in typical Samus style and escaped. Then there were the events of Metroid Fusion, where Samus was hired to go back to SR-388, where she wiped out the Metroid population. This was to protect some researchers who were studying some of the other life forms on the planet. While exploring an underground cavern, she encountered a Hornode, which was basically just a horny toad, which she dispatched with a missile before being infected with an X-parasite, which we mentioned way back with the Chozo. While heading back to the research station, she loses control of herself to the X-parasite, losing consciousness and crashing her ship into a nearby asteroid belt. After being ejected in an escape pod, the scientists found her and transported her to the Galactic Federation headquarters. Since Samus was infected, so was her suit. The power suit had to be surgically removed, but they could only remove portions without damaging her body too badly. However, she was still infected and wasn't given a very high chance of survival. Thankfully, someone was able to manufacture a vaccine developed from the DNA of the infant Metroid from way back when. This vaccine is able to rid the X-parasite from Samus's body, while giving her the power to absorb X to regain health and weapons without killing her. Once she recovered, she was given a new ship, clad in the fusion suit, and was sent back to the research station that she was at previously to investigate a large explosion. Her goal was to find out what happened, rescue any survivors, and retrieve the specimens that they were researching. She found out that all the specimens were infected with the X-parasite, and she had to find a way to eliminate them. Along the way, the X-parasite took the form of Samus, known as SAX, or Samus Aran X. Very clever. Because the X-parasite reproduced asexually, it could take on the form of other life forms, like Samus. And this was a massive issue. While trying to escape from the hell that was this research station, she ran into another one of the specimens that the researchers was working on. and it was the cryogenically frozen remains of Ridley. Just when you thought we were rid of him, his eyes glowed as Samus approached his frozen body and she was forced to fight a version of Ridley that was infected with the X-parasite. And of course, she won again, proving that dinosaurs should stay extinct. Having taken interest in the X-parasite, the Federation began closing in on the research station to get their grubby little hands on it before the station had a chance to be destroyed. Trying to find a solution, Samus, along with her new ship's computer, decided that the best course of action was to redirect the station's orbit so that when the station was destroyed, SR-388 would be blown up as well, taking care of the X-parasite for good. Before she reached the control room to facilitate the plan, she was interrupted by the SAX, who she was able to defeat and reduce to a form where she could absorb with her power suit. But it escaped before she was able to do so. Setting the controls and heading back for her ship, she found an Omega Metroid waiting for her in the ship's place. The Omega Metroid was basically a version of a Metroid that, instead of being a floating jellyfish head crab that we all know and love, looked almost like a dinosaur with 2 legs, 2 arms, boasting massive claws. Samus was attacked by the Omega Metroid, leaving her on the brink of death when the SAX made an appearance and stopped the Omega Metroid from killing Samus with an ice beam. The Omega Metroid lashed out, reducing the SAX to its base X form, which allowed Samus the time to absorb it and gain the ice beam attack, which she used to defeat the Omega Metroid. Her ship returned in the nick of time so that she could both escape and watch as the research station collided with SR-388 and blew them both up. Then, after an undetermined period of time, Samus received yet another mission from the Federation. An X-parasite was seen on the planet known as ZDR, and Samus was tasked with investigating it after the Federation's robots, the Emmy, that were sent in went missing. It turned out that on the planet there was a Chozo named Quiet Robe, who informed Samus of the one responsible for the Emmy's disappearance, another Chozo named Raven Beak, who was trying to get Samus's DNA through the robots. Raven Beak wanted Samus's DNA because at this point it was fused with Metroid DNA from all of her missions, and he was going to use that to take over the galaxy. Samus said no, accidentally released an X-parasite from containment and ruined his plans by embracing the Metroid DNA to go sicko mode and killed Ravenbeak, destroying ZDR in the process. And these were the events of Metroid Dread. And it does not pain me to say that this is the end of Samus's adventures to date. I never realized how derivative of the original Metroid games the games were until this point, and the ones that were definitively not derivative were the ones that were met with criticism, like Metroid Prime 3 and Metroid Other M. As much as I love this series and the Metroidvania genre will forever be one of my favorites, I really hope that they continue with the trend of Metroid Dread to create an entirely new wave for the series. I think we need to take a permanent break from Mother Brain and Ridley, or I might go insane. I honestly couldn't bring myself to be less mocking of some of these games as I was going over the plot of them, because so many of them are just the same game over and over again, which is fine, but I wish that they would have created some new threats instead of just constantly resurrecting old nemesises, because it feels like it was just for the sake of nostalgia, and it felt a little lazy. One resurrection is enough for me, but I don't need to fight Ridley 8 times, but that's my opinion, and if it's not yours, then I respect it. And so that brings us to the end where I ask, what'd you think? Did you know about the manga and Samus's backstory before the games? Because I certainly didn't. It's actually a really good read. It's about 400 pages or so, and I would actually recommend it. It's pretty cool, and the art style is charming. Or what do you think of the genre in general? I've said it many times, but Metroidvania is my favorite genre, I think, or at least one of my favorites. So any new Metroid, I'm happy to play. I also just wanted to take this time to really quickly shout out one of my buddies who just started a podcast a while ago. It's called Rival X Reviews, and it focuses on anime. So if you really love anime and you want to hear a dude talk about anime a lot, then please go check out Rival X Reviews wherever you get your podcasts. So far, it's been very informative, and as someone who watches anime but doesn't watch a ton of anime, it's been really great for me to kind of add a few animes to my list. It's always insightful hearing someone who's kind of an expert in a field talk about something, because you always learn something. And I've definitely learned that One Piece should be on my radar. But I'm sorry, I don't think I'm going to watch it. It's just too long. Maybe I'll try One Piece. But anyways, regardless. You can find us online at Lord to Death on your favorite social media or podcast websites. If you have any questions or suggestions for topics, please feel free to send me a message wherever you can find me or at lordtodeath@gmail.com. If you're listening on Spotify, there's also a Q&A function on the app. So if you want to suggest something or just say hi, feel free to type it in there. I would love to hear from you. And remember that if a dinosaur comes and kills your entire family in front of your eyes, become a vigilante. Everyone loves a good comeback story, and once you can get over your PTSD, you can also become a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. Or Batman. Dealer's choice. And of course, I'll lore you to death in the next episode. See ya.